The Common Council, June 22nd, 2017. This is the portion of the meeting where we have extended conversation on any item in the agenda or any items coming up that councilors would like to pull out and discuss. So please proceed.
I just have a question on item 7B. It's the 4th annual vigil. What I guess I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, it celebrates. It memorializes the big oil train crash up in Lac Megantic, Canada. And yeah, I was at the first one. It really is very simple, just kind of like a presence. There'll probably be some speakers.
Okay. Thank you.
Normally, if they just wanted to use a park, we have facilities within the clerk's office to allow them permission, but because, from what I understand from Beth, some of our equipment will still be out of stage, etc., they've asked to use some of the stuff that we've already got in place. So we felt it to be appropriate for them to ask the council for permission for that reason.
Still actually during Mayor's Cup? Is that?
This is the last Sunday of Mayor's Cup, that's correct. Any other issues?
I'll speak on the resolution that I brought forth for initial consideration. This comes about, actually it was started a couple of years ago, discussion with Reality Check, and due to personnel changes there and change of leadership, it kind of fell by the wayside, but they came back and asked to talk to us. The discussion was had. They intend to work with Clinton County starting in September, I believe.
We're having group meetings right now once a month.
And the emphasis right now is in Essex County, is that?
Clinton, well, we're doing each county, Franklin and Essex.
Okay.
I'm mostly on Clinton.
Okay, and that's where this resolution is coming from, to support the raising of minimum legal age for tobacco products to 21 years of age. It's so that you could go to the county then,
Yes.
showing that we are on board with this.
Yes.
We would be, well, there's presently 10 counties statewide that are 21. You're presently working on 3, I believe.
We're working in partnership on 6 right now. I don't know how, I can't remember how many total.
I think there's 10. From what I saw and reviewed, there's 10. So that's where this is coming from. Thank you. And
Are there other municipalities within the county that have adopted similar resolutions? Or?
We're working with the town of Plattsburgh right now. It just started. We just had our first meeting up in Lone for that county. We've met a few times here at the county building. I think we've met 2 or 3 times. And then as a group with AHI, we've met 3 or 4 times, either in person or via phone. For the 6 counties in total we're working on right now. That's Franklin, Essex, Washington, Warren, and Hamilton. But the goal is to each individual county have to go at it itself.
Any further discussion? Any discussion, any other items on the agenda? If not, I certainly would entertain continued discussion on our budget. I have up on the board here essentially the budget with some slight modifications and incorporating current information. The budget that you all passed for the next 5 years. This is designed to help tailor the one-year budgets that are due in October and June, or January, as you know. I want to show you a couple of things, and I added a couple more years to the end just to show you some of the tendencies here. The first thing I'd like to show you is, as you know, one of the things that concerns us right now is a pretty dramatic increase in healthcare costs this year, and combined across our healthcare network, not just the employees and not just the retirees, but we estimate a healthcare increase of about $600,000 projected so far. We're hoping that will come down. But as you've also realized in past councils, there seems to be quite an acceleration, inflation of healthcare that seems to outstrip the CPI. If we continue with even somewhat modest growth in those healthcare costs, instead of growing 600,000 as our experience has been so far this year, if that came down to something closer to $200,000 going out, you can see that kind of getting our house in order by 2022 or so, after 5 years, goes significantly negative once more. It's something that every municipality is realizing. We're really at the jeopardy of healthcare costs right now. So I just wanted to point that out. And I also sense some discomfort with the level of cuts that we've been discussing. You've proposed $500,000 and $400,000 of permanent and temporary cuts this year alone in 2017. Let's say we just erase those cuts and simply did the status quo of zero perceived retrenchments over the next years. And to make this balance, to try to start getting back into positive fund balance, etc., over the years, and even by 2024, perhaps have a fund balance of around 10 or 12%. Remember, the state average is national average around 31%. The tax increase, in absence of temporary and permanent expense reductions, as you'd outlined, is in the order of 35% this year, this upcoming year, 10% the next year. If you compound the 3 years of 2017, 18, and 19, the total increase in accumulated tax levy for the Plattsburgh will be around in the order of 60%. By 2024, that increase will have accumulated to almost 90% tax increase in the end of the next mayor's term. At that point in 2024, we reach the 20 mill rate, or a 2% tax levy. 2% is the highest allowed by the state constitution for a municipality. We've essentially hit the wall in about 7 years if we don't start doing anything, really significant things now. Actually, the comptroller recommends to stick below a tax levy of 1.5%, although they recognize that constitutionally we could go up to 2%. And New York City, by the way, I think it's allowed to go up to either 2.25 or 2.5%. But all the municipalities in the state are obliged to stay below a mill rate of 20 up per thousand. So that's somewhat concerning to me. I think that I'd rather know that now rather than later, while we have an opportunity to try to stay below that limit. I do know that there is a town in the state that is up to that limit and is essentially in the process of going to default. So there's something you need to be well aware of. I certainly don't want to leave this legacy to the next mayor to somehow have to handle. I'd answer any questions. At this point, I really recommend we come up with a plan to address these issues sooner rather than later. You've identified in that original spreadsheet from last day about $1 million of cuts, permanent and temporary cuts each year for the next 3 years on average, slightly more than $1,900,000 for this year. We're now halfway through this year, so it means really doubling the pace of cuts compared to what you'll have the luxury of over the next 12 months of next year. Each month or each week we delay these decisions, we're getting ourselves essentially 30,000 unrecoverable dollars further into the hole. We had a very difficult discussion last day about an item that totaled $57,000. We take 2 weeks to decide what we're going to do, and we can have another $60,000 in the hole. Take 2 more weeks, another $60,000 in the hole. So this to me really commands my attention. You know, I literally stay up nights worrying about this kind of stuff. So I'd much rather see something along your original plans and having a plan coming from you I'll certainly be happy to recommend what I would do, if you'd be willing to accept it, but a plan that you can endorse much sooner than later. Ideally, we'd like to have the luxury of hanging out for another 6 months and deciding what we might want to do. But by 6 months' time, we're at the end of this fiscal year. To be honest, we're insolvent. The perils of having a fund balance at the start of the year off with $717,000, then getting hit with about $600,000 of extra healthcare costs we didn't expect, and an arbitration ruling from the firefight on behalf of the firefighters that we estimate will cost us in the neighborhood of $750,000, $800,000, and our fund balance is far more than just disappeared. So I certainly entertain in our remaining minutes before the meeting begins any discussion that you'd like to have. Please.
Mayor, you said you'd recommend a plan if we asked. I'm asking.
I'd be happy to answer. Ultimately, over the next 3 years, this is going to be incredibly painful for the city. I don't think that we can possibly figure out a plan where people that we really highly value are going to be unscathed. What I'd recommend is a plan that can cause the least level of disruption early on, but I really need you to recognize that that may get us through this year. Actually, the plan that I'm assembling won't even get us entirely through this year. Won't get to quite the cuts that we hope, but maybe other things like the diligence on the part of the department heads to reduce expenditures, a much more aggressive effort to reduce overtime. As you know, we're significantly over budget, over projections and overtime already. Hopefully we can get those things coming along the line. Some of them are going very well, some of them not so well. Maybe those in combination with some of the ideas that I've been working out will manage to do it. At the same time, we've been having discussion with the county. As you know, our county administrator, Mike Zerlo, has been put in charge of a county-wide shared services committee, working with all the municipal leaders to come up with a plan. Once he assembles and proposes that plan, it'll be endorsed by the state and then have to be endorsed by each of the individual municipalities whether they want to opt in or opt out of the plan. With that plan, any savings we identify, if we can save, say $100,000 of savings by working with, for instance, the county and the municipality can share those savings. So we can not only realize that savings this year, but the state will give us a check, and kind of like a double or nothing. So if we can save $50,000 as our share of savings and shared services, not only do we book those $50,000 of savings, but the state will give us another $50,000 as an incentive and thank you for making this effort. So that could help with this as well. Some of the things that the county has been discussing and asking if we'd be interested in having further discussions in, and I'm willing to discuss absolutely anything at this point, include assessment, HR functions, information technology, procurement, ice and snow, although in that dimension I probably don't think there's an avenue for much sharing because they're somewhat leery of taking on the very challenging job that we have to do with ice and snow in the city, our narrow streets, our parking situation, that kind of thing. But they're, those four that I mentioned, more or less, they're either very enthusiastic about or at least willing to or encouraging us to have discussions with them.
So it's a combination of expenditures and revenues?
Well, yeah, I guess it would be revenues and that one-time payment from the state to do it. Also, the state will, and through a different grant, through Tim Ryan's office, that you all are very familiar with those discussions, they'd be willing to provide us for any transition costs and moving from handling services in one way versus another. So if there's some sort of transition cost to get us from point A to point B, not the variable cost, but kind of a fixed cost, they'd be willing to help us with that transition as well. So the city wouldn't be out of pocket to try to figure out consolidation of services.
And the diligence with expenditures and overtime, you're asking that of the departments, correct?
That's right. That's
and
right.
what is the feedback on that?
Well, you know, we have a monthly department meeting, and we go over at that department meeting the information that you all see from Chamberlain Marks at the end of each or beginning of each month. We track how each department is doing on the various financial benchmarks. And in most categories, except for overtime, seem to be problematic, but not broadly. Actually, some departments, I think DPW, for instance, is doing very well in overtime this year. A couple of departments are over in overtime, but I think in most of the other categories, the departments are actually performing pretty well. So we're keeping our fingers crossed with that.
So on the overtime, but there's other expenditures other than overtime.
That's right.
So
Purchases of equipment,
right.
those sorts of things. I've been also delaying as best I can new hiring. I'd like to move from a soft hiring freeze, which I've discussed with the department heads and you as well, to more of a hard hiring freeze and an emergency basis kind of a hiring freeze until we can get ourselves out of this woods and see how we're going to meet these goals for this year.
So the cooperation with expenditure reduction is where?
I think,
because I mean, we've handled a couple ourselves, obviously, fire truck,
Yep.
the expenditures. Is that because they weren't being surrendered willingly and it was given to us, or?
well, I don't know. I think each department head obviously feels very strongly about their equipment purchases. I think for the most part, they've been, with some exceptions, been willing to go along with this. Yeah. Yep.
The short answer to Dale's question is we approved the capital plan and then we had to approve modifications to it. So that's why we ended up doing it.
Right. My authority in this is to essentially administer the budget you give me.
Right.
And I've got the authority to administer very quickly and enthusiastically, or administer it in times of budget crisis a little bit more slowly and prudently. So I think in a time like this, if I can look much more closely at a purchase order, even if it's in the budget, you know, to be honest, I will. I'll ask many questions. I think the department heads are getting tired of me asking questions on some of these items that I think could be more discretionary, and I have been using that latitude. Okay. And I'll continue to use it as best as I'm permitted to use it.
So are there being reductions beyond what we talk about here? I mean, we talked about some big ticket items, but are there other things not being?
Nope, we're almost fully staffed up based on the requests of the departments. I think there's one outstanding staffing request that I haven't hired yet, and I haven't had the answers to my questions satisfied yet. Some of them take as long as 24 hours, some of them take as long as a month or two, depending on the level of urgency. There's one case I can think of where I actually approved a hire, and the department came back to me and said, thank you for that hire, but we really want to help out. I think we can delay this for a while. Let's revisit this in the fall. This was a DPW, and that was something that they actually had the approval for that.
And when this was developed, was there contingencies considered? When a department suggests, do they build in like a little contingency as a safety net?
In their budget, you all would know more than me whether there's a contingency in the budgets.
I mean, it's not labeled as such, but is it there?
To be honest, I don't think that they built in much contingency, saying we better put this little cushion in here just in case.
Under another name. Okay.
I don't think so. I think that, and you guys know much more on this than me because you went through this process last year and I didn't, but I think that your department heads were giving you a pretty lean budget this year. I've had a number of them come up to me and say that we would have liked to have this piece of equipment or that, but to be honest, we didn't feel we could, in good conscience, put it in the budget, and hopefully we'll get it in a subsequent year. Subsequently, you know, John Ruff himself came up and offered another solution to a trailer purchase recently, as you recall. And Steve Peters came up and volunteered to delay maintenance of a field or rebuilding of a field, if you recall. So they are coming up and trying to reduce their budgets even farther.
Colin, you mentioned that with the plan that you just indicated or just mentioned, that it still came up short a little bit. Approximately what amount would we see
in my calculation, the numbers would add up to, depending on how successful we are in implementing the savings as I hope we could, somewhere in the neighborhood of 600,000. Now, most of them were obviously at that level. If we're proposing consolidating whole programs, you'd outline permanent reductions this year of 500,000. So you might say, hey, you're exceeding that expectation. But remember that $600,000 on an annualized basis, really only $300,000 if we could somehow implement them almost today. So we're still short. Maybe the remaining 400,000 with the various efforts that the departments are doing, we might be able to come up with that 400,000, but then we're hit by the 600,000 of unanticipated health care costs. Chamberlain Marks believes we might be able to get that 600,000 down a little bit lower than that, maybe $300,000 or $400,000. But I don't think any of us expect we can get that down to the budgeted level. So it's kind of, you kind of win a little bit in some based on the estimates, but lose a little bit in others. So I think that overall, on average, this is a relatively accurate portrayal.
I think that rather than a matter of expenditures and reducing expenditures, while that's important, we also have to realize that number 8 up there is the most costly thing we're facing this year. And to try to deal with that is very challenging. And it really exceeds the health care increase cost to finance that.
That's a good point. Number 8 refers to expected costs in the fire arbitrations, but I also tag on the end of that note that by 2027 our unfunded liability to come up with the money to support the retirees' health care benefits that they've expected, that unfunded liability will total $277 million. That represents 30% of the property value of all the non-exempt properties in the city. So in essence, that's equivalent to a 30% mortgage that we put on all of our houses in the city to try to meet that unfunded obligation. Now, a private corporation, how they deal with these long-term health care liabilities for retirees, they're required to put their money each year into a trust fund. If we were to do that for our employees, we should be putting between $10,000 and $25,000 a year aside for each employee on an ongoing basis for when they retire. Put that into account, have it earn interest, and then pay out those funds like a private corporation is required by law to do. The odd thing about municipalities is not only are we not required by law to put those funds aside, instead we'd have a pay-as-you-go system, we're not allowed to put those funds aside. So we should be very careful when we make promises what those precisely mean for future taxpayers. Any other questions? You'd asked about other rationalizations that you'd asked specifically about what we could do with the county. Other things I'm anticipating exploring include parks and recreation, to figure out how to divide up the responsibilities of parks and recreation to achieve savings. One notion I've been discussing to now had been to take some of the parks maintenance functions and roll them into the pre-existing maintenance functions that DPW already does in the parks. As you all know, DPW already mows the lawns in the parks, and there's also a special crew under Parks and Recreation that maintains bleachers, draws lines on fields. You know, there's been some discussion about privatizing some of those out to the various leagues themselves. So I'd like to consider and come up with a plan for how that might be moved and more consolidated. And the remaining parts of Parks and Recreation are probably programmatic. Figure out how the various programs in recreation that we all value very highly can still be maintained as well. I can't think of any others that have come to mind, or there has been any more analysis than those. Any further discussion? Are you prepared to begin the meeting then? So let's call the meeting of Common Council to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Reed.
Present.
Councilor Armstrong.
Here.
Councilor Kelly.
Here.
Councilor Dowell.
Here.
Councilor Ensel.
Here.
Councilor Casper.
Here.
Councilor Kretzer.
Here.
This is the part of the meeting where I make some comments, but I think I just made them. Where the city is obviously very concerned about the budget. We're going to be working incredibly diligently on ensuring that the city is put on as firm a financial foundation as possible. There's all kinds of things to be very optimistic about in this city, including the great work on the downtown revitalization initiative that Paul has helped spearhead. All that will be for want or for naught if we don't manage to create the long-term sustainable budget for the city in a way that can maintain our city residents, keep them living here, keep having people move here. So I certainly, and I believe all the council, is very cognizant of the importance of having our fiscal picture in order, having our taxes be affordable, and not leaving an unaffordable legacy to those that will follow us. Those of you who may have just arrived, the spreadsheet we've been discussing is on the board. Certainly all of our deliberations are also on YouTube, and you're welcome to follow them there as well. I had the luxury of speaking to Rotary the other day, and I shared with them yesterday, and I shared with them my sense of happiness and optimism about what we can do together in the town, in the city, in this region. All the reason to be optimistic. I described to them the optimism we have for the DRI, the opportunity to use this $10 million downtown revitalization initiative to attract new people and retain existing people in this area. But I was also very honest that we're going to have, as a city, have to directly address some of the fiscal problems that the city has. I didn't do it in a sense of pessimism. I did it in a sense of optimism. If I really believe strongly and I'm so optimistic about something, I'd rather do the work now to make sure we can realize that optimism. So the work we're doing now just really is an extension of that optimism, that we really love this place. We want to make sure that we're going to leave a city for our next generation at least as good and hopefully a lot better than we've been able to enjoy in our time here. So we're in a rough patch. Much of it brought by fund balance has gone from 6.8 million to essentially zero now in just a few years. We've seen this coming. We obviously have to act now, and I believe that there's the resolve to do it. So thank you for that, and we'll continue on with the meeting, please.
Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of the Common Council held on June 8, 2017 and June 15, 2017 are approved and placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office.
Moved by Councilor Kretzer, second by Councilor Ensel. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the payrolls of the various departments of the city of Plattsburgh for the week ending June 21st, 2017 in the amount of $525,671.46 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby empowered and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the thereof.
Moved by Counselor Armstrong, second by Counselor Dowdle. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the reports as listed are hereby ordered, received, and placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office.
Moved by Counselor Wenzel, second by Counselor Dowdle. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the bills audited by the common council for the week ending June 23rd, 2017 in the amount of $654,320.32 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and city clerk are hereby authorized and directed to sign warrants drawn of the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Counselor Dowdle, second by Counselor Kelly. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. This is the opportunity in the meeting for any individuals like to come and address the council on items that are related to anything in the agenda tonight. There will be another opportunity to come up and address the council in any item, whether agenda or not, at the end of the meeting.
Good evening. Hi, Joe McMahon. Building inspector, I very humbly and respectfully stand before you to speak about the issue of longevity. And believe me when I say I don't want to do this in this setting, with Joe sitting 5 feet away, but if there's a chance that this could be voted on tonight, then I feel like I have to. I'm sure all the managers have their own story, but this one is mine. I started with the city in 1993 in the ASME union. I worked in the union for 20 years, working my way up from data collector to municipal code inspector to housing code inspector. Then 5 years ago, when my supervisor retired, that job was offered to me. I remember meeting with Mayor Kashvazak and him saying, "The job is yours if you want it, and here's what we can afford to pay you. Level 6, step 1. Think about it and let me know tomorrow." We talked about the pay and how it was the same as someone walking in off the street, and actually not much more than I was already making. He said, "That's the best we can do right now, but you get to keep all your benefits, including longevity." Because I was actually already getting longevity as a union employee, paid out my paychecks every week based on years of service. And as we looked at the salary schedule that was being offered, he said, "This is where you'll be today. This is where you'll be in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years." It was presented as fact that the salary schedule was a given, and that there should also be cost of living increases along the way too, but those were not a given. So I crunched the numbers. I confirmed them with Rich, who said, "Yes, that's what your longevity converts to, but it's paid out differently with managers, twice a year instead of weekly." I'm not sure why. So armed with this information, I went home that night, had to talk with my family, my wife and daughters at the dining room table, as families do. I explained to them the job was offered and what that might mean. More money, yes, but I won't be home at 3:30 anymore, a lot more meetings, more responsibilities, dealing with issues on weekends sometimes, people are gonna dislike me, etc. Could we all live with that? The next day I accepted. Would I have accepted if I thought that someone might tell me I could lose my longevity? It's impossible to say really, but it definitely played a part in my decision to accept. Longevity is not a bonus or a raise, it's my pay. It's part of my pay. It's part of the salary schedule that was offered to me that I accepted. The hard times of the city are not lost on me. I try hard every day to do our job while keeping spending down, as I always have. But to think that I could lose my longevity, it's scary. It's part of my pay. It's 10% of it. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Joe.
you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Evening. Before I make my statement, I just wanted to acknowledge all of you in the pile that is on your desk that you inherited over the years. And my comments are going to be direct, but please do understand I respect and sympathize with each and every one of your situations. Okay? All right, so my name is Chris Gushla, and I'm the Assistant Chief Plant Operator at the Water Pollution Control Plant. For those who don't know me, I was born and raised in Plattsburgh. I've been working for the city since 2002, and I've spent half my life with the city, 15 years, dedicated to the services that we provide. I received my college degree in 2010 through SUNY Plattsburgh, and soon after this, I was hired as an operator trainee in the ASME union at the Water Pollution Control Plant. I recognized that I could accelerate with a licensure exam with a 4A, which is required for the chief plant operator at our plant due to the size. So I did that. I received my 4A degree or license, and at that time I was offered the opportunity to become a part of the city's management team, which at the time I was very proud to accept. It did take a few days, like Joe said. I had to speak with my family. It was a very hard decision with my wife and with kids, just because of what the city's managers encumbered. But in the end, we decided it was the best decision, not only for us, but for the city itself. This is due to that specific position as chief wastewater treatment plant operator. It can't really be filled by anyone. It's a very technical position. And I knew that the chief would be retiring in a few years, and I wanted to gain all his institutional knowledge that isn't in any books. So I did this, and I gave up my union protection because I care about the plant, the lake, public health. So like many managers before me, I moved from the union to management. So here I am standing in front of all you, Mr. Mayor and the council, but more importantly, the public. I never imagined I would have to do something like this. But following the events of last week's council meeting, I felt as though something needed to be done just due to what had been proposed at the end, which was a resolution with a moratorium regarding managers' earned and budgeted longevity pay. So I'm not doing this for myself. I'm in fact doing this to represent the whole body of leaders. I became a manager just because of how this city's manager is to be. I witnessed it during the ice storm in '98. I witnessed it in 2011 with the 2 floods, and numerous times between those dates. They know how to serve and protect the city and the people that live here. So I'm up here tonight speaking about, not speaking about salaries or raises. I'm up here due to the misinformation that the public received yesterday in an article which should have not have been published. It's actually kind of embarrassing to the city that something like this was in our paper. And I say that because the article was very politicized and very one-sided. Longevity checks, as Joe mentioned, they're not bonuses, as the article stated more than enough times. They're a regular part of our pay and salary, and they're earned through the years of committed service with the city. There are many things that the articles did not mention, but one important fact that I would like to point out is that the AFSCME union employees have longevity. Theirs is just included in their hourly wage, and they receive it in their paycheck bi-week. We get it in 2 lump sums as managers. So I want to stress to each and every individual in the city that managers have been overlooked for their services over the last decade, but have been greatly disrespected as of late. And I understand why there's public outrage now and then. This is common in the city. But to cause outrage by basically throwing the people who have dedicated their whole lives into the people who want to dedicate their whole lives to this community under us, so to say, is extremely discouraging. So to withhold earnings from us that have been promised, earned, budgeted, to read an impromptu written resolution with a moratorium off of a notepad at a public meeting, and then to post an extremely politicized article the day before a public meeting, it's just disrespectful. We as managers have done nothing less than try to assist with this new purchasing policy. We did not bring this $1 million deficit on ourselves. We instead inherited it, just like all of you. But to destroy the morale of each department's leaders is not the solution. There's no end game. It's discouraging and it's a very ineffective way to lead a city. And I do want to ask one question before I sum this up. What do we recite before each common council meeting? The Pledge of Allegiance. So to get the city out of the financial deficit in which we're currently in with the general fund, we need to get back to the very foundation which this country was founded on, and that's to be one and work together. Is it really going to do much to amend a 30-year resolution on longevity pay? Other than creating public outrage and upsetting the managers, this accomplishes really nothing. And to say that this is a bonus check and publish it in the newspaper, it almost seems like propaganda, I guess. I don't want to say that. And is this really worth demoralizing managers and creating an enormous public relations problem? I personally would say. So, I ask all of you to reconsider these rapidly brought on items on tonight's agenda regarding management. To better establish understanding in terms such as longevity, the managers and the council's management committee should meet. We are a group of people who care about the city. And I personally believe that we should be given the opportunity to voice our concerns and ideas. So again, please reconsider your vote tonight on this item. And let's get together in a respectful manner, like we all deserve, and work things out, not only for the management team, but most importantly, for the public whom we serve. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Chris.
I begin speaking, my husband will begin passing out some papers for you. Look out, which I'm
This
sure
is
you've
for
seen
agenda
before.
item.
Is this
Your
related to
comments
the
have
agenda?
to do with the agenda, you can present
Yeah, the
this at
second
the
comment.
end.
The
second.
Oh, okay.
Yes, that's what I
General
thought.
issues.
Okay.
We can keep it. We
Just
can
a little
keep
bit
it.
early.
I'll keep mine. Oh, okay.
We'll be back.
Okay,
All right.
Dan, don't go anywhere, you'll get a chance.
Good evening. My name is Dave Powell. I am the Chief Plant Operator for the Water Pollution Control Plant. And I've been in that position at the Water Pollution Control Plant for 37 years. And I've been part of management for 37 years. At this time, I would like to read a joint statement from the managers of the city. This has been crafted, and I would like to take this opportunity to present it to you. A group of managers of the city of Plattsburgh would like to correct public record as it relates to the discussion of longevity payments. Longevity is a long-standing and defined practice that provides a part of an employee's annual compensation to them based on years of service. As such, it is part of an employee's regular pay. It is not a bonus or a raise. This misrepresentation needs to be corrected. Hourly employees receive longevity payments in their regular paychecks, while managers who are salaried receive their longevity payments in 2 lump sum payments annually. We object strongly to the entire spirit and approach of this discussion. A resolution is not needed to review this topic. We are disappointed by the statements and mischaracterizations made in yesterday's news article. We object to the clear and direct politicizing of our regular compensation and what appears to be an attempt to discredit us in the eyes of the public. The inappropriateness of this cannot be understated. We object to the attempt to take advantage of the vulnerable position that managers are in, solely due to the lack of union representation. Managers in the city of Plattsburgh are a dedicated group who are ultimately responsible for providing all the services that the residents of Plattsburgh enjoy, including clean water, sanitation, streets and bridge infrastructure, electricity, parks, recreation, public safety, code enforcement, police, fire, etc. This is an attempt to simplify a complicated process by alienating and vilifying a group of people who are dedicated to the best interests of the city. Managers have asking for appropriate discussions on clarifying and solidifying manager benefits and compensation without success. Managers have tried to propose fair and equitable compensation and benefit plans, but those initiatives have gone unresolved. Let it be known that managers have been readily providing solutions to the city's budget woes, and have been and always will be committed to the proper funding and function of the city. Regardless of the political nature of these inappropriate and unsolicited attacks on longevity, we are at the service of the city, but we must insist that we be treated fairly, with dignity and respect. In summary, we respectfully ask the following. Number one, the resolution be withdrawn. The resolution is not needed to review management compensation and benefit policies or the extent to which they are being followed. And number two, that the existing committee tasked with reviewing management compensation and benefits be expanded to include more management representatives. I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Any other individuals like to come and speak?
I'd just like to say something. Can someone switch the light on in the back? There's a light switch right there, just so that, there we go. Thank you so much. You know, in terms of longevity pay, it's something that I've had to educate myself on. You know, in trying to keep you know, our best efforts in you know, managing the budget and the financial crisis that the city is under. You know, we have to look at an opportunity to save every dollar. You know, to try to sacrifice longevity pay and efforts to do this is completely counterintuitive. And you know, turnover is extremely expensive for any organization and at any salary level, and it's very costly in regards to the bottom line. The purpose of longevity pay is to retain highly trained, competent, and experienced people in their positions who have reached the highest level of pay and who are no longer eligible for promotion. This is done in efforts of not incurring increased costs that are engendered by recruiting, hiring, and training. As an example, the cost of replacing an employee is anywhere between 10 and 30% of their annual salary. And I think that the facts speak for themselves in regards to this methodology of basic management. And I also would respectfully ask that the resolution be taken off of the agenda.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, let's continue.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council approves contract number 2017-09, instrumentation water pollution control plant, water filtration plant be awarded to Total Control System Services Inc. for the total lump sum price of $36,212, and that the mayor be authorized to sign the maintenance service agreement.
Moved by Councilor Armstrong, second by Councilor Kretzer. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilor Armstrong?
Yes.
Councilor Kelly?
Yes.
Councilor Dowdle?
Yes.
Councilor Ensel?
Yes.
Councilor Casper?
Yes.
Councilor Kretzer?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council approves permission for Renee Dupree and committee to hold the 4th annual memorial from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. and vigil at 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Sunday, July 9th in Trinity Park and McDonough Monument. Insurance certificate will be required.
Moved by Councilor Armstrong, second by Councilor Dowdle. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilor Armstrong?
Yes.
Councilor Kelly?
Yes.
Councilor Dowdle?
Yes.
Councilor Ensel?
Yes.
Councilor Casper?
Yes.
Councilor Kretzer?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council approves that the mayor be authorized to sign master agreement for contract D035705.
I'd like to move the motion and waive the reading.
Moved by Councilor Armstrong, second by Councilor Dowdle. Discussion to waive. Moving to waive. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, discussion. Seeing none, roll call.
Councilor Armstrong?
Yes.
Councilor Kelly?
Yes.
Councilor Dowdle?
Yes.
Councilor Ensel?
Yes.
Councilor Casper?
Yes.
Councilor Kretzer?
Yes.
No travel requests. Two items for initial consideration. Councilor Dowdle?
Well, as we discussed earlier, this would be for Plattsburgh, the city of Plattsburgh, to support the raising minimum legal age for tobacco products to 21 years of age. As we heard a representative, I don't know if you want to speak again on this, explaining the outline, it would simply have Plattsburgh supporting Clinton County going to a tobacco age purchase of 21 years of age, following suit of approximately 10 other counties, and there's approximately 6 underway, including Clinton County. This would show our support when they go to the county with their proposal.
Do you want to vote for?
I would like to vote for, yes.
Like to move to have
I
it
would.
considered?
Second.
Moved, seconded. This is movement to vote and consider tonight then?
Is that by title or?
Yeah.
Any further discussion?
Guess I just have a question on enforcement. Would it be enforced similarly to alcohol purchasing?
I'll get back to you, because we've been talking about this with many people, and we talked to Chicago County, what they're doing up there. Dana can better answer that question, possibly, but it's something that at this point, they've tossed about with many ideas, because, yeah, we'll get an answer for you.
Wouldn't it be enforced in a similar manner to that which is in place now for the 18?
They only go up to 18.
Yeah.
And so the feeling with that is an age difference between 18 and 20, you're still really only checking a sale of an 18-year-old rather than a 20.
So ID would be required though. Yeah.
But I'd have to get back to you.
So we're essentially backing
We're just, yes.
an
offering
idea that's
support.
in progress.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Trying to get
This is
support
what we're doing.
from
Right.
individuals, communities, organizations, towns, cities. That way, we will present this at some point, whatever that is.
Good work. Thank you, Councilor Dowdle.
Any further discussion? Prepared to vote in favor of the resolution. All, should it be a roll call? Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor Casper?
Yes.
Counselor Kretzer?
Yes.
Second item for initial consideration, sponsored by Councilor Kelly.
I first proposed this last week, and there was a massive uproar about it. And I appreciate people coming tonight to speak to us. We listen to you respectfully. You department heads, I would ask that you do the same as I talk about this. If you'd like to go into the parking lot or into the hallway and yell afterwards, we'll do it. But in this chambers, we conduct ourselves with decorum, and we discuss things rationally and without a lot of emotion. Is that acceptable to everyone here?
It always is, yes.
Well, not always, Dale. So it wasn't last week. So we're going to try again this week. Okay? Mayor Reed first presented this idea to me, and I jumped on board with it. Why did I? Because we need every single cent of savings we can get between now and the end of the year to balance our budget. Mayor Reed discussed in detail earlier in the meeting about how we need to come up with $900,000 savings from withholding the longevity, whatever you want to call it. I'll just call it longevity, okay? The savings from that would result in 0.5% of the tax levy in 2018. Now, what we're doing is we're asking the taxpayers to finance the lifestyles of our department heads. And we always do that. Let's not make a mistake about it. It's just that in these times of extreme financial crisis, and I don't know any other way to describe it, extreme financial crisis, we have to come up with every possible savings that we can find. The former mayor went to the retirees of the city and said, would you please help us out with some savings in health care? No, we can't do that. Sorry, we can't do that. The firefighters were asking negotiations, can you please help us out by taking zeros for a couple of years there? No, we can't do that. They walked out of negotiations. We're now in arbitration. I ask again, another group of people, would you be willing to chip in? Would you be willing to help out to keep our city solvent? That's the question, folks. It's not, nobody's making these numbers up. They are real. They're real. We need all the help we can get. We need people to pitch in and do what they can, all of us, to keep our taxpayers from fleeing the city because they can no longer pay the taxes. I can't tell you how many abandoned homes I have in my ward. I walk up and down the streets and see them all the time. The grass is growing high, the curtains are out of the windows. These people have fled because they can no longer afford to live here. So we have to do something. We have to. This came up for discussion first in 1977. And by the way, it was called a longevity bonus by the council back then, and nobody seemed to mind. But again, it was discussed in 1990, and it's been that way for 27 years. 27 years times $100,000. What is that? $2.7 million we paid out in 27 years. And it was discussed in 2008. I was on the council at that time, and we asked the question then, why do people get paid for sticking around? And some of you guys were here, you'll remember that discussion. But the council then, myself included, we just didn't have the political will to discuss it. Today, in 2017, I don't know that we have a choice but not to discuss it. You know, I am dead serious when I tell you we're going to be broke. We're going to be broke. You can look at those numbers yourself and see we're going to be insolvent at the end of this year. If we can't come up with some savings from someone, and they have to be large, you know, we might as well just turn ourselves over to the state controller's office and say, we can't do it. Sorry, we can't do it. I just realized in looking at this chart, which I've looked at 100 times or more this evening, that if we had resolved this in 2008, if we had not paid longevity pay for those 9 years and put that money into the general fund balance, our general fund balance would be $900,000 healthier, and we wouldn't be sitting here having this discussion. So I ask you, department heads, would you please consider, without a lot of emotion, without a lot of backbiting and back and forth, can we find another way? Can we find another way to compensate you fairly and save the city $107,000 a year going forward? And can we do everything in our power collectively, all of us, something to make our city solvent and to keep us from bankruptcy or dissolving or whatever we have to do going forward? I don't want that. I love this city. Loved it since the day I stepped foot in it, and I continue to love it more every day. I want us to remain a city, remain an entity. I look downtown and I say, man, things are really hopping down here. Things are going good. If we weren't the city of Plattsburgh, some of that stuff might not be happening. So I ask you, we're not, nobody took away your first half of the year payment. You received your checks, correct? All I'm asking is that we sit down together, and you can read it in the resolution. We sit down together and we have this conversation. What can you do to help the city? If one of you can come up with $107,000 in savings year over year that does not affect your pay, I want to hear about it. I want to hear all about it. But what else do we have? What else do we have? I mean, I think everything should be on the table. If we want our city to survive, everything should be on the table. Everything. Thank you.
What you're asking for is exactly what the department supervisors are asking for, which is a conversation,
yes.
not an edict. So
yes.
The fact that we can sit down without a resolution and have a conversation to do some problem solving.
You're incorrect, Josh, and I'll tell you why. Because this was done by resolution in 1990. If we're going to change it, it has to be done by resolution.
But to have that conversation collaboratively with the department supervisors to find what that solution is before forcing something down their throats without any collaboration is not in the spirit of why I took office.
Well, you can read it and see that all of what you just said is there.
But it needs to be a conversation in good faith and good spirit, not a resolution of finality.
This is not a resolution of finality. In fact, it says, through this comprehensive review, all management compensation and benefit policies, whether regular pay, step increases, or special pay like longevity pay, will be evaluated for their fiscal feasibility, competitiveness with similar pay scales, and their effect on the city's long-term fiscal health. All department heads are encouraged to join in a respectful and productive discussion with elected city officials in work sessions, special committees formed solely for the purpose of compensation review, or in any other format the city deems appropriate.
And I agree, all those things should be discussed in collaborative conversations with the department supervisors.
I'd like to just add that I wish that this invitation to collaboration had occurred before that resolution was popped on us at the end of that council session.
Well, that was last week. This is this week.
I'm not quite finished, Mike, thanks. You know, according to your rules of decorum, be respectful here. I don't like a trend of having resolutions to do things that we already should be doing. Everything contained in this resolution is about having a discussion. We're not bound by resolutions to have discussions. In fact, as I said last week, perhaps it was lost on everyone, Dale and I worked last year on exactly these issues. And we never completed our job, and we would be happy to go back to the table and bring managers to the table to talk about it. But it's right there. Instead of having resolutions debating whether we should have a discussion, let's have a discussion. Let's start tomorrow. The second and third point I want to make is with regard to revenue that you asked, can the managers or any of us come up with $107,000? When we were working on our 5-year budget plan, Steve had a proposal for the marina at Wilcox Dock that would generate $35,000 in revenue every year, and you said it was a drop in the bucket. So $57,000 is a windfall, but $35,000 is a drop in the bucket. I don't think $35,000 is a drop in the bucket. And when you rightfully talk about structural changes that not only are about decreasing deficit but increasing revenue, that's where that takes place. That has to be factored in. We did not factor that into this plan. And I think that we should be responsible and do those things. The managers are bringing forth ideas to generate revenue, so let's do it.
I think one of the issues and one of the reasons why it became so heated, if you will, is that I think there was a lot of confusion, especially with the resolution coming up so late in the meeting. In fact, I hadn't heard any of it until the resolution was introduced. And I think there was a lot of confusion and misinformation about what was being said and what was being tried. I think, and I certainly don't mean to speak on behalf of the managers, but I think there was a feeling of they may have been feeling threatened that their compensation was being taken away from them that evening, right then and there. And I can speak for myself, saying I probably would have felt the same way. That being said, I think that knowing the managers and knowing the will of this body, I think that we can get together and sit down and come up with some sort of agreement that both sides would be happy with. And I would be more than certainly willing to sit there and work with them on that. I think I have an incredible amount of respect for the managers and what they do.
Clarification?
Sure.
You mean outside of passing a resolution?
I mean, I see it in the resolution. I can't speak for the managers, but I would hope that with the resolution or even without the resolution, that they'd be willing to sit with us and come up with something that is amenable, that addresses the issue.
You're thinking of sitting together in spirit rather than via resolution?
Yes.
Okay. And if I may, earlier in the evening, we heard that the mayor told us that the department heads have come forward with various reductions in expenditures and ideas. And I'm wondering, do they do that at the monthly meeting? Or is that just on a daily basis? I got an idea, or do they have to wait till the monthly meeting to bring that forward? And the only other comment I would ask Richard Marks, we're hearing $107,000. And I went through the budget items, but not all of that comes out of the general fund, does it?
No.
How much of it comes out of the 107, because they're all departments?
117.
117.
Yeah. Probably 33% is impacting the general fund.
Right.
So a third of 117.
Approximately $40,000.
Approximately.
Okay.
That's an important point.
The pieces for recreation, very complex, being counted all the general funds and general fund funds, anything regarding very complex.
So it'd be 80,000 a year. 80. It's.
Yeah.
80 total.
Or,
No.
40 total. I mean, 40 total a year.
40 annually.
That's right.
Okay.
117 is the total for 2017. 33% is the impact on the general fund, including the rec and rec complex pieces.
So I don't mean to dismiss the balance on that, because obviously it comes from somewhere. It doesn't fall from the sky. Where does that come from? And can we afford it from where it's coming from?
Where does what come from?
The balance of the 2/3 left out of the 1/3.
Well, water and sewer funds.
Right. And how are we set with those funds?
Water fund's in trouble.
Okay.
It's been in trouble. We're down to pretty much the cash that we've raised through infrastructure, investment charges. We have to do something with the water fund. We've been discussing.
Okay.
Sewer fund, it's still solvent, but I'm capital reserve is dwindling. It's gone from 5 million several years ago to about 1.8 million. There's no capital reserve in the water fund remaining, say $35,000. So operationally,
Okay.
the costs can be covered from the sewer fund. It just depends on the time of the month. When we're looking at the water fund, it could be we're dipping into the infrastructure charge cash to pay for the operating expenses.
Okay.
But John has some plans that he has to go over with you about what we're going to do with the water fund.
Okay.
But it needs help. John made the comment that the water fund is dried up.
Oh, boy.
Well. Okay, thank you.
I couldn't resist.
All right. I am done. Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
I have a great deal of respect for the motivation behind this resolution. I have a great deal of respect for the effort that goes with the desire to save and the confrontation with how dire our financial situation is. And I thank you for your efforts to examine things so carefully. However, I think the larger issue that we're facing here today has to do with process. And what I see is a kind of rush and a desire for solutions that kind of undercuts the communication and the process by which we need to arrive at solutions. It was alarming, no doubt, to discover that this payment need to be paid and this payment would again be made in December. However, the fact that it was budgeted and the fact that individual budgets have been planned around this payment is not insignificant. I believe that we can find solutions for our budgetary problems by going through the proper process, by being transparent about what we intend to do, and to communicate with all parties regarding those matters. I think we're going to end up going through times that are very divisive and problematic because of that if we don't put our heads together. I can understand the pressure that would lead to decisions that may not really be as well thought out as should be. But given a week's time, given the opportunity to look at all sides of the issue, I don't feel as though the risk of alienating the managers is worth this resolution, and I would move to withdraw it.
The only thing I know that's real is that $900,000 that we have to find this year in order to give the taxpayers the luxury of only a 4.9% tax increase next year,
And
which they're not going to like. I promise you.
And I promise you, Mike, that we will pursue every avenue to make that happen. And I mean, the mayor has described a plan that we're all looking forward to hearing about in more detail, and no stone will be unturned. You know, you like those kinds of sayings, but I don't think that we get on the right footing if we just spring things on people without the proper communication. And that just has to be the way we operate. We get into trouble every single time we don't communicate properly.
Last week, did anybody actually advocate for not making the payment last week?
No.
Because the checks were all made and ready to
Right.
go,
Yeah.
correct?
That was
Just
a
to be
misunderstanding that was
understood.
Right,
unfortunate.
that's what I addressed. I thought there was,
And this
There was some
resolution is merely to discuss and get together, very much in the spirit of what everybody in this table has said, to discuss with the managers before December the proper process moving forward. I don't read in this discussion any statement about not making even
No.
the next payment.
No, there isn't.
So it seems to me like everybody in the room has been saying the same thing all along, but we seem to be all very divided in doing it.
No, I think it makes sense to me that you can, in the spirit of cooperation and collaboration, agree to meet, and that, with the unfortunate lead up to this moment, the resolution seems like, as Josh put it, an edict rather than an agreement. And I take the managers at their word that they are willing to sit down. But, you know, when you break down the figures into what the general fund actually amounts to in the payout, a drop in the bucket, I guess.
Well, again, I don't think anybody had put on the table a proposal to not pay any
Exactly.
bonus, just to clarify.
Right.
This is not all marshmallows, though, because the second sentence of the resolution actually says before committing to making the semi-annual payment for the second half of 2017. So there is a predisposition and a connection to making the payment itself contingent on a certain outcome of the discussion, which might be normal anyway, but placing that within the resolution, I think, predisposes it in a negative fashion, and that's why I would oppose it.
So if we struck that sentence, you'd be okay with it?
I would not be okay with it simply for the fact, what I said before, I don't like the trend of having to put forward resolutions for work that we should be doing automatically. Because then that would seem that we would have an excuse not to do something because we had not created a resolution for it.
Yeah,
Let's just
interesting.
make
Yeah.
a commitment to do it.
In my estimation, we're not going to have the political will to do what needs to be done here if we don't really start thinking hard about
We will.
what needs to be done and how we can do it.
I'm telling you, Dale and I did this, and we had conversations, didn't we, with some of the managers?
Yes, we did.
And they were not easy conversations.
We would ask you to bring those reports forward and share them with us and get them going again.
I'm sure Ann has them, and we're happy to come back to the table and start again. And we had some ideas about what to do, including, you know, kinds of assessment and so forth, but to make it fair, to make it equitable, and to make it good for the budget too. Because we were doing that study, and it wasn't easy, and we didn't expect it to be.
The only other thing I want to say about this tonight is that if we don't have the political will to do these relatively small things, we're going to be forced to do some things that we can't even imagine. Dissolve the city? Are you prepared to vote for that?
But
Go
once
into
again-
bankruptcy? Are you prepared to go for that?
Once again, though, I would say that it's about process. We can arrive at whatever, we can achieve our objectives by following a process that makes sense to everyone and bringing everyone on board. You know, we run the risk of dividing ourselves up into adversarial groups otherwise.
I guess it doesn't really matter how we do it, but we got to do it.
Yes.
Mike,
We don't have a
I gotta
choice.
say, I guess I'm a little taken back. I think we all recognize the seriousness of the situation. And I think each and every one of us are committed to doing what needs to be done.
I hope so.
To keep the city
I sure
on
hope
track.
so. I sure hope so.
And I mean, I'll say this publicly right now, I'm willing to do what it takes, and I know that you are, and I think the rest of my colleagues on this board feel the same.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Peter. That's a vote of confidence. I appreciate that. Glad to hear that.
Chamberlain Marks can correct me if I'm wrong, but we look at a general fund, as you can see there, of somewhere around $23 million. Perhaps 14 million or so is tied up in direct payroll costs,
Yeah, that would be correct.
and maybe another 6 million.
Excuse me, general fund is 9.9 million in payroll, but when you take a look at the 22,385,000, you can say that 7 million of that is benefits that you really don't have much control over unless you're gonna come up with a new healthcare plan that changes things. You're gonna get the state to lower the retirement rates, which is unlikely unless they're gonna reduce them. Remember, they've increased those on the city so that they changed
from 2009, from 1.2 million to almost triple, 3.2 million, because they had such a fall from their losses on the investments of the retirement funds. We suffered a 40%, 32%, and 29% increase 3 years in a row. That increased our 2009 cost from 1.2 million to 3.2 million. We're still at about 2.8. So that benefit is unlikely to be reduced by any significant amount. Workers' compensation is a consistent increase every year, 4 or 5%. So take that 7 million out of the 22, and you've got about 15 million left. And that's related to operating costs and mostly payroll. The general fund, about 74% is related to total employee benefits and payroll. The 9.9 million is the direct payroll.
So if that remainder, assuming that we can't trim healthcare costs within the next 6 months, that you're still going to need sand and salt for the roads in preparation for the winter. How do we trim the remaining direct payroll costs of about, say, $10 million? It's the only place that there's some give. If we come up with $1 million, have to come up with $900,000 of savings, is really everybody in the city prepared to take a 9% wage decrease tomorrow? Actually be about 18% because the year's halfway through. I mean, this is the extent of what we're looking at. And each group is going to look at us. One group is going to say, no, I think that group over there should pay. And that group's going to say, this group over there should pay. And we're going to go around in a circle. If we all just said, all of us, let's be willing to take an 18% cut. I'll take an 18% cut. If all of us took an 18% cut for the next 6 months, then maybe another 10% cut next year. I guess we could balance that. Or we look at some other way to do it. But you know, there's no way this is going to be easy.
No.
It's going to be painful. We have to figure out a way to not get our wagons in the circle and start shooting at each other. We got to figure out a way for every time there's something that we think we can't do, somebody puts directly on the table something we can do. I've been hearing a lot of ideas what we can't do tonight. I'm at a loss for what we can do. I'm looking for your ideas and the council and the public for how we save $900,000 this year, $950,000 next year. These are permanent cuts, and 1.2 million the year after that. So the taxpayers will only be putting up with a 4.9% tax increase and another 4.9% tax increase. In total, over 3 years, including this year, that's going to be a 20%, 19% tax increase. Councilor Ensel said the other day that the only entity that's going to benefit from that is Carpenter Brothers, as they're loading up moving vans, moving people out of the city. To what extent, if we can't figure out how to do this, and every time somebody objects to something, I please ask you to put something else on the table that we haven't thought of before. But for every objection, we have to have a solution. I can't tell you how many people come through my door with problems every single day. I hug the first one that actually comes through my door with a solution. But now is the time for solutions. We can't do this. Our city does not have enough general fund balance to pay our bills this year.
I believe we can do it, Mayor. I do. And I look forward to the ideas that you have. I encourage each and every one of us to come up with our own set of scenarios to help us out of this. It is a crisis. We've been warned of this crisis, and now we painted ourselves into a corner, and we must act.
So do I have your agreement that in our very difficult discussions we're going to be having, not just this year, but next 3 years, every time you object to something, you're going to put something else on the table instead that's going to fix the problem?
Yes.
Is that a pledge you all can make for me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Do my best.
Yes.
And again, in defense of Councillor Kelly, nobody ever proposed to not make that last longevity payment. Those checks were made. I think Chamberlain Marks will support that statement. Those checks were all prepared. Councillor Kelly's resolution was merely to reevaluate this and come up with a plan for December. I don't even think he advocated then to not pay in December either, but to come up with a plan, as is our responsibility as a council to develop policies, rather than simply blindly follow policies without proper reconsideration at every council. When I was on the county, at the beginning of every council, we have to adopt a set of policies to carry over. That is your responsibility to do each time. That maybe we should devote a lot longer time to our organizational meeting to make sure everybody understands and is reaffirming every policy that you believe you're applying. And I know some have argued they're somewhere buried in the budget. Because you passed a budget, somehow those policies are magically being followed. But I tell you, that budget no longer applies. We have run out of money. If we want to simply say there's a sacrosanctity in that budget, we are, according to actuarial accountants, insolvent at this point. Thank you. I believe there's not sufficient interest to pass this resolution. Is that correct?
Seemingly.
Would you prefer to just withdraw it, and we'll consider these questions, or would you like to seek a seconder?
I think the discussion we had tonight is very valuable. And if we can all agree to come up with similar savings somewhere else in our operations or somewhere, then I would be willing to withdraw this.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Seeing no further discussion, I'll ask for any new business and councilor reports, please.
You're welcome.
Please, Councilor Pretzer.
So I had some time over the past week to think about a vote that was made last week in regards to hiring a new employee who would be charged with DRI implementation. And the mayor expressed that the state had advised that we'd be able to use, I think it was anywhere between 1% and 2% of the $10 million DRI award to hire a staff person who would be able to help in implementation of the DRI, which is going to be a monumental task in order to do all the amazing things that will be done in downtown. I listened to the mayor, and I trusted that due diligence was done in regards to making sure that the entire amount, or nearly the entire amount of the amount of this being paid to this position would be able to be reimbursed. I spoke with the mayor about this, and he had me talk to Paul DeDominicus, the community development director, who was charged with writing the grant and collaborating to write the grant that actually got us the $10 million. And through those discussions, I've realized that of the 10 projects that will be fulfilled through the DRI funding, that it's possible that a different state agency may be charged with the implementation and the oversight of each of those projects. Then in looking through and kind of researching these different departmental agencies, there are some agencies who may be charged with significant projects and implementation with the DRI, such as the $5 million project in the Durkee Street parking lot, who do not reimburse for any staff time whatsoever. In essence, that means that the promise of reimbursement may not actually be a promise and may not be a reality. So it worries me, especially in looking to save money, that we may, and we're told that we would be reimbursed nearly in full for this position, and it appears as if that's not a reality. And I have no qualms or questions with the qualifications of the candidate who was chosen to fulfill this obligation, other than I wish that the community development director would have been consulted more in the process. And the fact that I think that I would actually like to reconsider and see if there's a way that we could somehow turn back the hands of time and or kind of deauthorize the approval of funding for this position at this time until we have a definitive idea of what will be reimbursed to us. And furthermore, this person would have to be tasked if there are 10 different agencies overseeing these 10 different projects, every minute of their time would have to be very carefully calculated in some kind of spreadsheet so that each of those agencies would pay their portion of what this person's yearly salary would be. And also the fact that we have yet to receive final implementation directions from the state, and this person, I believe, is supposed to begin work on July 5th, that from July 5th until the time when the state actually finally gives us this information, no one will be reimbursing the time for this person. So I guess I just am curious how we can go about potentially revoting if that is the will of the council. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add.
I would be interested in hearing from Paul about
What's this all about?
what's it, yeah.
It's the process by which reimbursement is to occur, as far as my understanding at this time, is that the DRI is not going to be one large $10 million grant, but maybe divided up across different state agencies, the proper agency that would oversee that type of project. We don't know who would be what at this time, but we would have to follow whatever guidelines that state agency requires of us for a grant project. And so, depending on what state agency that is, some will do on capital projects, some don't, some allow for it, some don't. So the record keeping is what we need to be cognizant of, so that way the individual will be able to recoup time and funds.
Now, I think Josh mentioned that some of the organizations will fund it, some won't.
Correct, depending on the state agency and the intended project.
But we don't yet know which state agency will be managing each project.
So what's the potential amount of money that might not be funded?
It depends on how the time is spent, not so much what project is done, so.
I'm sorry, however, half of the project is going to Durkee Street. So if for some reason that project is from an agency who does not reimburse or compensate for staff time, then in essence 50% of the salary would not be able to be recovered or reimbursed.
Not quite,
Oh,
depending
I'm
on
sorry.
Depending on how the individual's time is spent. So if they don't work on a particular project that doesn't reimburse, then we're fine, and they will work on the projects that do reimburse.
So when do we find out?
I don't know. I don't have a date, a solid date. I don't know. I haven't heard. So there's just, I guess it is a matter of record keeping. It's a matter of time spent.
Well, should we delay the hire since we don't know? I mean, we don't want to spend more money.
Because I would suspect there'd be quite an audit at the end of all this, of the dipping and dabbing and.
Generally, grant funds are, we have a monitoring board.
I'm sure. To make sure that things were charged appropriately to the appropriate agencies that do reimburse.
How much of a delay generally is there what's the timetable in general for reimbursement?
Depends on the agency and the process. Some are very quick, 60 to 90 days, some 6 months, depends on the process.
Or longer.
Can be longer.
Me, Dan comes to, or not.
Or something.
No, something.
Yeah.
Is that in the form of a motion or resolution?
To do what?
I'm asking Councilor Kretzer.
I'm not sure about process.
I don't believe the council has that authority. The council has authority to set the salary, which you did, and to confirm the mayoral appointment, which you did. It does not give you the power to appoint or suspend. That falls with the mayor. So what you're asking for is a novel question. I was looking through the charter as you were talking, and I don't see that the council having that authority.
So I guess I would just ask the mayor to make as prudent a decision as possible in regards to the start date, and also in what capacity the reimbursement will come and from which agencies.
Thank you. Any further discussion or reports? Seeing none, this is the opportunity for the public to please come and address us on any issue. Please.
Thank you for your patience.
Show and tell.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And I know you're all familiar with what's being handed out, too, so. Basically, we went out, you see there's a petition, and you'll see their photographs there too of the property. Now, I know, certainly after being here tonight, the city doesn't have money to do anything. But we do think something needs to be done. In studying this problem, it seems like not a lot of organization on the part of the developer. And a lot of that fell through, and that is what the problem is. But this place has been like this since 2011. Now, I'm a lifelong resident of Plattsburgh, and somebody said something about people moving out of Plattsburgh. Well, I just talked to a couple yesterday who thought about moving into Plattsburgh. They were coming from Michigan, and then they said, oh my gosh, we don't want to live by that. So, you know, it's a double effect. Remember that the first thing, I know tourism is big in the city of Plattsburgh. The first thing that people from the North see when they come in is that. It's also a safety issue. I know I worked with, as a counselor, and I worked with teenage boys for a long time, and they're very curious, and we have seen them up on the roof. People have seen them up on the roof of that building. And I'm just waiting for somebody to be seriously, seriously hurt. Also, it tends to be a health hazard, especially for the older people, because when the wind blows, you're getting mold, you're getting the smell, you're getting everything up there. When I went around getting the petition, a dear lady brought me into her home facing that, and she said, come in, come in, come in. I said, no, that's okay, no, come in. Open my curtains, she said, and I opened her curtains, and all I could see after her lifetime of saving and buying this place was junk. So it's very difficult for people in that respect. Home values are going down. Who would want to buy a house across the street from that, especially if you knew it had been that way for 6 years? So it's getting worse, it's collapsing in on itself. And in studying all this, as I said, it seems to be that it was a lot of disorganization, and rumors abound out there. You know, you go to one door and they shorts, this is the problem. You go to another door and that's the problem. But I think the problem is mostly on the part of the developer not being organized. And I think he was even supposed to make a meeting lately and didn't make that meeting because he was going to be certified for abatement. But now he can't be certified for abatement because he needs a notification, and that'll cost him money. Fine. Do your homework ahead of time and not make us, you know, suffer. At this point, we're just feeling that the developer would tear the property down and wait until he does have the money to develop. That would be fine too. It looked like a lovely idea to develop it. But the lovely idea is now a piece of junk there. And if you had just the lake view, that would help too. Because again, I'm worried about safety, I'm worried about tourism, I'm worried about health for people. And you know, if there's that much asbestos and vermiculite there, and we're all, the wind, you know what the wind's been like lately. So, I don't know what else to say. I would be remiss, even if my first charge up here, if I did not come back, because so many people signed this. And by the way, this was only a few days. If I had a few weeks, I think I would have had half of Plattsburgh sign it, because they all feel the same way. That
You would have had me sign it.
I would have you sign it?
I would have signed it.
Oh, I know. I know you would have. It's just a disgrace to our city. We need to have more pride in that. Again, I love Plattsburgh. I've lived here all my life. And I have had people come in from out of town and they don't understand it.
Oh, you were healthy when we moved here. You were healthy when you moved here.
So was I.
Seriously, I went to many doors and one person did not want to sign it. One. And only one. They were eager to sign it. please let them do something about it. And again, I understand the city does not have money, I understand that, but there's got to be something that can be done with the developer. It just goes back and forth. He should have known when he started the building built at that time period would be full of asbestos. Then he decided, I guess, to get certified himself to handle the abatement. Then he found out that would cost more money for another notification, so back to the original process. So, and we just need to pin him down and get something accomplished here.
I do I wanna allay fears of one sort, Joe, with the idea that there is asbestos, exposed asbestos and vermiculite. It's not a health hazard, is it? That's my understanding. It's contained. It's not.
That's my understanding as well. In fact, the developer's here and I'm just prepared to speak tonight.
Oh, okay, good. Would you like to comment, Mr. Developer? That's all I have.
Thank you. Thanks for being patient, too.
Hi, Rob Ware. I haven't seen the petition. I had heard some rumors about it. I actually have a friend that lives over across the creek. I guess I have some good news and some comments on what you have. As far as the health hazards, which to me should be the biggest concern, the vermiculite is encapsulated in blocks. So nothing with that has been demolished. What you see demolished are sections of buildings that were abated by a professional contractor about a year ago. Trying to take things in order here, but the next thing I want everyone to know is we are doing the abatement ourselves. We are certified. We are doing it as soon as legally possible. When I say that, I have no problem paying new notifications. I tried to work with the previous abatement contractor, and that didn't work out, so we're going forward on our own. And that will happen as soon as the state allows. What you're passing around, I haven't had the liberty to view, might help our case considerably, because the state of New York will only let you start an abatement process immediately if they think there's some type of health hazard. Now, I don't believe there is, but if they see fear from the community, they're going to probably change their tune and say, no, you don't need to wait 10 days, you can start immediately, and it's, consider it like an accidental disturbance, where an accidental disturbance allows for immediate action and doesn't make you wait 10 days. And when they say 10 days, that's 10 days from when they receive the application and review it, and it's not always 10 days. So what I'm saying is I almost need your help in your petition to bring to the state so we can start right away. We have the money, we have the manpower, we have the approvals. We just need the state on board to let us start as soon as possible. We're ready
I'm
to do it.
happy to give you a copy of the petition, and I'm happy to write a letter from my position as their representative saying that there is very grave concern of the residents around that area, and there has been for some time. If
Right.
that would help.
It will help.
All right, you got it.
Yeah. What is the obstacle to removing debris, though, once it's demolished?
What is the obstacle?
Yeah, I mean, why hasn't it been removed once it's demolished?
It is removed simultaneously as it's demolished.
Okay.
When it's an asbestos-controlled demolition.
Okay, but for example, how current are these pictures? Current, like as of a few days ago. Yeah, so according to the residents, and their representation of the situation, it seems to me like there's a lot of debris lying around, and it's been lying around, and so why hasn't it been removed?
It has not been removed because it's, that portion that you're seeing was abated, so we started to demolish it ourselves, which we thought we had every right to. The Department of Labor saw that, asked us to stop because it's adjacent to contaminated portions that are not abated. They consider it one big project, and at the time we were not certified, so they basically slapped us on the wrist and said, that's not how it works. You need to
So, I don't think I understand though.
Come in and do it.
You were able to demolish this part, right? And then that's supposedly not anything that a disturbance to it would be negative.
That was our opinion. We paid a considerable amount to have the top floor abated,
Uh-huh.
so that's the only portion that we touched. But because it's adjacent to sections of building that are not abated yet, they consider it all one project, which we're not allowed to touch.
Okay.
Because at the time, we weren't a licensed contractor for
Okay.
asbestos abatement.
Now, it seems that the fence is down.
That's us when.
Most of the time it blows
Yeah,
down.
I drove by the other day and I looked at it and I said, okay,
backed
the
up
fence is
today.
down.
And I think it's the high winds with
I
the
was back there
screen.
Sunday to put it back up.
That
It's
a
there
privacy
today.
screen, I think, acts as a sail sometimes.
Yes, it does. So now we've reinstalled the fence in a zigzag pattern to help strengthen it. Put some concrete blocks on the feet, whatnot.
Why did you put the green up there to hide
This-
it or?
I was asked by the
This
council.
isn't a conversational time. If you guys want to talk
Oh, sorry.
outside of the session, then that would be perfectly fine.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I did want to add too, we do have funding secured now for our first phase of 18 condos. Hopefully that helps with your budget. It's about $250,000 a year in property taxes. So I know it doesn't all go to the city, but you know, including land school.
How many years does that take?
We have 6 pre-sold.
Again, it's not a
18
conversational session. I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry.
I do have a question though.
And if you'd have to.
speaker.
I'm sorry. I have a question.
You'd have to wait,
speaker.
and you'd have to come up to the podium. That's all right.
So I think that's all I have for now.
Okay, you can come up and ask a question.
Thank you, Mr. Boyer.
My question is there anything in city guidelines or zoning or housing or anything that says a property must be maintained at a certain level? Or is there a time period that it can be allowed to be in disrepair and be a safety hazard? I know I read your editorial with interest about safety being a primary concern of yours, Mayor, and I wonder if this doesn't fall into that category.
And this is also not a conversational session.
But we can ask
No,
a
no,
question.
I'm just
Mr.
saying,
Secretary.
as a point of order.
We can request that Joe McMahon come and speak to that question.
All right, thank you.
Mr. McMahon? Could you
Do
answer?
that now?
Yep, please.
Yeah, there are safety guidelines that are covered under zoning and building codes. Those are usually kept to the side when there's a demolition project in the works. So those are usually tolerated. We make sure the site is secure. And so the delay in the demolition is really the hard part. But yes, there are building code, property maintenance issues. If this project didn't have a valid permit, there are legal avenues that we can go.
Okay, so how long can it be in progress? Will progress not be made?
Well, there's actually nothing specific in writing with that. I've worked with the city attorney about trying to push this along, but there's nothing that says after 6 months you get to do this, or after 8 months.
Maybe we need to look at
you get to do that.
So it can stay in this suspended state indefinitely?
Well, I'm in constant contact with the developer. If I wasn't, then we would probably be taking a different course of action.
Do I understand correctly from Mr. Board that with between 0 and 10 days from now, we would begin the completion of demolition?
That is the goal, yes.
Is there any reason to believe that you may not meet that goal?
The only reason to believe that would be coordination of everyone involved. Includes a hauling company, has to be certified, landfill ready to receive the material, air quality control monitor, myself, my other operator, and that's it. So
And you're waiting from abatement approval for your.
I'm waiting for state green light, yes.
But along the lines, Joe, of the demolition, you need a permit to demolish, correct? Is that a separate permit?
Yeah.
The demolition permit?
And the redevelopment permit is separate, new construction is separate. That permit they haven't obtained yet, it's the
What?
demolition permit.
A demolition permit. And is it like a building permit? It's good for 2 years?
The building permit is good for 2 years. Demolition is essentially a building permit, but it's specific to demolition. Building permits are good for 2 years.
So is that the same thing with the demolition permit?
Yeah.
So it was issued last August? The
It
demolition
was
permit?
issued last August, yes.
So it could go 2 years to answer the question?
You could work under that same permit for 2 years.
Okay. There's the time frame. All right.
2 years.
I think we all understand the seriousness of this. Is there anybody else who'd like to come and address the council?
Good evening, Kevin Farrington, city engineer. I was absolutely not planning on speaking tonight, but I feel compelled to make one brief comment. We've heard a lot about the inappropriate way that the longevity issue has been handled, so I'm not going to go back into that. I think that's been made clear. We have heard, though, a lot about the budget problem. We have a major budget problem. The mayor understands it, the councilors understand it, the managers understand it, without question. I think that one important thing, there has to be a shift in thinking with respect to this budget problem. Because if the elected officials think that by just extracting a pound of flesh from management is going to somehow solve a problem, you are gravely mistaken. This is 2017. Wages are different today than they were in 2000, which were different than they were in 1980, which were different than they were in 1960. In 1960, a city clerk's annual salary was $6,000. Wages creep. That's a fact of life. Ignoring that is not only not a solution, it is the problem. Look at your different times that not you, but the city has withheld standard cost of living adjustments for different bargaining units, kicking the can down the road, only later to have to confront a massive correction to that. I imagine now with the firemen's settlement looming in front of you, you probably wish that the folks in charge at the time had found a way to work with those unions and find a reasonable solution so that instead of the arbitrator saying, we're going to give you all threes, that you find a way to call that 1.5, 1.75, 2.25. So the idea that we're just going to ignore it and that's going to somehow be a solution is not only not a solution, it is a huge part of the problem. A wage and compensation study was done 10 years ago. Now, there's been a lot of talk tonight about let's look at the wage and compensation study. This was done by Stafford's team of professionals. They looked at other municipalities in New York State. They looked at employment indexes, cost of living indexes, and concluded that the managers' benefits should be increased so that they're more comparable with union and that their wages should be increased. Nobody liked that. So we put that on the sheet, put that aside. Now you can do another one today, but the reality is it's probably going to come back and tell you the same thing. Last point. We have services in this city that are second to none. We have the greatest park system in 3 counties. We have the best fire department, police department that you'll find anywhere. We deliver clean water in an economical way. We provide sanitary service. We keep our roads up reasonably well. We do all these things. We clear roads, we clear sidewalks. People love the city. People love our services. I would be the last person to suggest that we diminish any of those. Those are tough choices. That's outside my pay grade. It is not appropriate for me to suggest that another department should cut their department. It's not my place to do so. Unfortunately for me, I'm not in your shoes, because those are tough decisions. I wouldn't know where to start, because I look at these departments and I see they're fantastic. I don't know where that is. But the shifting needs to change. The thinking needs to shift. The idea that we're going to somehow extract a pound of flesh and artificially suppress wages back to 1990 levels is foolhardy. And certainly targeting a single group of people And in order to attempt to do that is inappropriate. So I look forward to working with you going forward as we deal with these difficult budget issues. But I think that we have to really very seriously confront the reality of some of the limitations. And the idea of wage suppression is simply not a solution. It is, in fact, the problem.
May I have permission to speak, please?
Thank you, Kevin.
May I have permission to speak, please? Kevin, I would take your speech there and give you the challenge that Mayor Reed gave all of us. Bring us some savings. Bring us some savings. If you don't want your pay cut, bring us some savings. Thank you.
Any other individuals like to address the council, please?
Yeah, I had to brain fart. The reason why the state can't regulate the 21, tuba, it's a state regulation. So in order for it to be done by the county, the state would have to go T21.
Okay.
So that's why.
I see.
Thank you. Any other individuals like to address the council? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councilor Dowdle, second by Councilor Armstrong. Roll call.
Councilor Armstrong?
Yes.
Councilor Kelly?
Yes.
Councilor Dowdle?
Yes.
Councilor Ensel?
Yes.
Councilor Casper?
Yes.
Councilor Cruiser?
Yes.
Thank you all.
Midnight.
7 o'clock. Roughly 7 o'clock.
I've only been there for a second.
Clipper came in and gave us the run away.
Start them with a